Moving through the city manager's report, you have the administration report there in the front, where I'm noting a few items that staff is working on of importance in the coming months, one of which is the administrative policy manual, which should show up on the council agenda for December. We're also working on a mid-year budget presentation for the council. That's expected to be in February. And then the fall newsletters in the works should be out by December 10th. And one of the articles in the newsletter asks for the public to submit a name change for the local community newsletter as a contest. And the names would be submitted, provided to the city council for a final decision of the winner formally recognized by the council at a future meeting. And then there's a list of other priority projects that we're working on. And then you have all the other departmental reports, and staff is here to answer any questions that the council may have on any of those particular reports.
Any questions on the city manager report, Derek?
Thank you for your report. I assume that very soon, one of the not too distant meetings, we'll see a complete list of the projects and the timetable and that sort of thing that you've had a chance to go through them with your staff. Last meeting, I mentioned in the staff report the number of I don't know what you call them, events, at least visits to MA and Selby Lane School, the police department had to make, and I noticed that in this month's packet, the same holds true. And I'm hoping we'll hear from staff sometime in the not distant future some action plan if there what can be done to improve the situation at these schools. I'd also like to compliment the staff and the city manager on the storm preparedness plans that Steve Tyler and the staff put together.
Any other comments or questions on the city manager report?
So I also wanted to thank the staff for their report on the the storm preparedness, and for sending it out to residents so timely. I received a lot of comments back from residents saying thank you very much, this is very helpful. And then in the public works, or the building department section, earlier last week we received an email from a concerned residents about the number of construction projects going on around town. And I was just going to ask Mike, if in your report you say that there's only 7 new building permits that have been issued to date, fiscal year, that's from July to now, is that correct? But in this one area that has been identified, it looks like there's, you know, a dozen construction projects going on just in this one small section of town, and I know that maybe, so is there a master schedule of, you know, how many construction projects we have ongoing?
Yes, and that's something that we can add. That's a very good comment. We'll be very happy to add that to future reports, because there is a lot of construction activity going around town. And so what we can do is add a table showing the types of active projects around town. And I think that will provide council with a good indication of the activity, but there's a lot of work going on.
Just
and the follow.
I'd like to clarify that for a second on page 9. The 7 permits that you're talking about, Vice Mayor, yes, that's non-residential new permits issued. The numbers right above it are new single-family residential so far. There's 12, and those are much larger. And that goes to the residents' concerns that there are a number of projects around the community.
So noted. Thank you very much. And then I understand that there's a regularly scheduled builders roundtable that you get together with some of the builders in town to talk about their projects and, you know, how they manage it and stuff. Is that open to the residents also?
Yes, it is. It's a monthly meeting that's held the first Monday of every month. It's during the lunchtime. It's held at the White House. We have a pretty large email list that we send all the meeting notices out to. And the primary purpose is to really make sure that lines of communication are very open between the town and construction industry, and to also talk about any problems or issues that either they are hearing about or we are experiencing, and to also share with them any new requirements that staff is thinking about and get their input before we actually implement any changes.
So I'm just wondering if there's a way that we could open that up more to residents so that they are aware of that. Maybe in the Athertonian newsletter, there could be a notice about that if it is regularly scheduled at the same time and date on a monthly basis. I just think that it would help if residents have this type of concern, instead of sending it in an email to council, go to this forum.
Could we put it on the web with regards to a regular scheduled meeting?
Certainly good.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for the manager's report.
Okay, so we'll move on then. Accept the manager's report. And next we go to the consent calendar. The consent calendar, of course, is items 9 through 17. These include the minutes from the last meeting, the bills that were paid over the last month, the treasurer's report, the salary and benefits resolution that Officer Metzger brought forward a comment on, and we'll be pulling that, I'm sure. A resolution for an EIR contract to support Menlo School, an EIR contract for Sacred Heart, a proposed budget for a party to recognize employees as well as volunteers in the town, a disaster relief fund allocation, the complete streets resolution that we talked about at the last meeting and came back with some edits, and a claim by Mary Belch. So do I have any council members that would like to pull or comment on items 8 through 17? And after we take the council comments, we'll come out to the audience, and anybody in the audience would like to pull one or all of them is welcome to do so.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to pull item 11. It has to do with the MOU. And item 14, which has to do with party. I've got a couple questions, one regarding the minutes, and one regarding item 15, the disaster preparedness, $20,000.
Okay. So 15 is just a question.
As is the minutes.
All right. Jim?
I have a question on the minutes, and I have a question, comment on number 9, the approval of the bills. There's a typo in number 10 that I'd like to draw to the attention. I'd like to pull number 11 and pull number 12. I have to recuse myself from number 13 and pull number 14. And I have a comment on number 16.
Mr. Mayor,
We'll make it.
the Vice Mayor needs to state for the record why she's.
Oh, sure. Sure. While I'm like to pull it.
Yep. Well, you said 13, you were recusing yourself.
Yeah. Because I live close to the project, within 500 yards of the project. Feet. 500 feet.
Thank you.
Okay. I was going to also make a comment and would like to discuss item 14. I have a question for the chief on item 15, as does Jerry, and I'd like to pull number 16. Anybody in the audience like to identify an item that's not been pulled for comment? The ones that have been pulled for comment are item 10, you have a typo. Item 11, which is salary resolution, the EIR for Menlo School, the budget for the employee / volunteer party, and the complete streets. Seeing no further items questions and comments?
Make a motion to approve number 17. I think that's the only one. Yeah. So I move to approve number 17, item number 17.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Passes, okay. Minutes. Jerry?
Yeah, my comment has to do with item 12 in the minutes. The council passed a resolution directing the mayor to write a high-level and fair press release in response to a pamphlet distributed by the APOA. As I understand, a press release did go out. I was somewhat surprised at the amount of detail that went into. But I had a question for town staff that I was surprised about the mailing to all the Atherton households. It was not something the council had discussed doing, and I'd just like to know, what was the approval process for that? What was the reason for feeling that it needed to be mailed out, as well as a press release, and what it would cost?
So, first off, I can say that the city manager and myself discussed it. We did do the press release on Friday. Didn't get carried really in any of the papers. And the city manager and myself discussed that we thought that it was important to get the information out. And he took consideration, and we agreed jointly that it would go out based on making sure that the cost was minimal.
That's correct, and the approximate cost was about $900.
Any other questions on that?
I also was surprised that it had, it had gone over and above what council had authorized, because, and I'd like to have the minutes read that council members Dobby Carlson and Vice Mayor Lewis said that they trust the mayor to redraft the letter at a high level, emphasizing our commitment to public safety, and send out a press release in response to the pamphlet. That is not in the minutes, and I think that should be reflected in the minutes. It is on the video. That's what we said, and I think that our intent was that we trusted you to, do a high-level response, and what actually was sent out was certainly not a high-level response. In fact, it was even more detailed than the response that had been in our packets. So I would like to make that change. I think $900 for the mailing is a lot of money, especially since we're looking at all of our costs. So I'd like to make that point. And then I do have other comments in the minutes. It appears that in number 3, where we adopt the resolution approving the agreement with the city manager, that there's no motion and approval in the minutes. So I think that that's really important to make that correction. And I brought that to city manager's attention when I met with him yesterday. The other, there was just one more. Typo fees on page 6 of 10 that I brought to his attention.
Okay. And I would like to make a comment based on the Vice Mayor's comment that the intent of the resolution, as heard by both myself and the city manager, was that the information to correct the misunderstanding and the misrepresentation was important, that all residents get a copy of that and get notified of that. And actually, the information was slimmed down quite a bit from what was in the original resolution. So that's my comments.
Mr. Mayor, can I just also make a comment? While I agree that wasn't in the resolution by the council, the motion by the council, I believe that in the interests of communication to our residents and transparency, it was the right thing to do. I think that we wanted all our residents to know what the council's position was relative to the information that is being transmitted by the APOA. And therefore, while, it wasn't necessarily totally approved by the previous council, I think it was the right decision.
Okay, moving on from the minutes.
I just want to make point out that on page 5, since we're making changes, it's Wallace. He just walked in, SLEETH.
Your minute, right? Okay. Shall we have a motion?
I move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. There were some comments or questions on the bills, both Elizabeth, well, I guess that's only Elizabeth. Nine.
So I just want to make sure in page 9 of 21, there's another bill for the environmental consultant services of LSA Associates for August. And it was my understanding that when this was put on the ballot in July, that all activity had been stopped. And so I was wondering why this charge and payment is being made for August bill.
Robert, when did that bill come in? And for what period?
It says August 2012.
It was for an August, it was an August bill, but it was a late bill that we received, so I'll research that.
August, so.
Well, the date on the invoice doesn't necessarily reflect the date of the order. That's why I was asking the finance director, what was the date on that?
The date, I'd have to research that, but it isn't, looks like it was for August bill. It was a late bill that came in that we paid in October.
But,
So can we get the details on it?
Yes, well, we'll get the details provided to the council. As far as I understand, Robert's correct, it was an August billing that we received in October, so that's why it's on this current warrant.
But when did they do the work?
In
July.
August.
We'll get the details.
Yeah.
Because we stopped all,
Correct.
you know, there was a lot of money that was spent, and it was all activity was supposed to have stopped as of July. And so we're still getting drips and drabs.
Well, I know when you issue a stop work, people collect their invoices, they may have third-party invoices. I know that this happens on lots of different types of government contracts. You get the details and the backup. And if the city manager and the finance director would prepare that information and get that out to us, that would be, so we can all feel comfortable that the directive that the council made was accurate. We'll do that. Thanks.
Can I make a comment on that item? You know, I've made these comments many, many times before, but the time we see what used to be called the warrants, it's interesting to see where it's being spent, but there's nothing we can do about it because these have already been paid. And at some point, I would ask the city manager if we could also see a copy of the invoices so that we at least have some say in them if we so desire. So I know I've made this point for years now and nothing really has happened, but I think it's important that if we're going to show our spending, we should show it before all the money's gone.
One of the things that we also discussed at one time, I guess George with another city manager, was that perhaps if we had 45-day payment terms on our standard contracts, then we would have time to actually have the council look at the invoices as they come in and approve those invoices versus approve the checks after they approve them. So that's something that perhaps you could think about. Okay, so there's no other comments on number 9, so I guess can we have a motion to?
So moved.
Okay, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, okay, motion passes. Okay, there was comments also on number 15.
Number 10 as well.
Number 10,
I'm sorry.
page 411, there's just a typo. It should be September 30th and not June 30th.
Yes, we caught that.
Great, okay.
Thank you.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Item 15, disaster fund allocation. Jerry, you had a question?
Yes, I did. I remember seeing something during the budgeting process for, I believe, $20,000 for disaster preparedness. So I'm quite surprised that that apparently didn't make it in the budget. The question was, why is this going into a police department fund when previously it was administered under the committee, disaster preparedness committee, that determined what it was that would be needed, and I think they submitted it to the town. I'm not sure how that paperwork worked, but anyway, the town paid the vendors. And so I'm wondering what has changed between the police department and the committee?
Councilman Carlson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
It was my understanding that when it was approved in mid-2011, that the $20,000 would be carried over into the police department's budget, and that it would be the police chief's responsibility to meet regularly with the gap committee, which I have been, and working on things like filling caches for emergency supplies, working with Steve Tyler on the town's emergency supplies for emergency workers, should we have an earthquake or some other disaster. The problem, I think, occurred is when it rolled over to the next fiscal year's budget, that line item, for whatever reason, didn't get transferred over to that budget, and then just reverted back to the So the question here before the council is if they want myself and maybe continue and look at where, oh, and by the way, none of the funds were spent because of time limits. And now we're looking at some areas where the funds could really serve the community well with respect to disaster preparedness. It's just a matter of approving that allocation and figuring out where we want it in the budget. If it's in the police department's budget, that's fine. I can manage it and continue to work with the gap committee. But that's really the question for the council.
Okay. The follow-up question is there a plan? Will the council see a plan in terms of how those funds are going to be used prior to their disbursement?
Yeah. In fact, I had some concerns about that. I had a sit-down meeting with the mayor about how those funds would be expended. And I had some concerns about how they would be accounted for, and so we kind of changed that the game plan. I can bring something back to the council for those expenditures. I'll work with the city manager and figure out the methodology for that.
Mr. Mayor. I think, as far as disaster preparedness goes, I believe that Lindenwood is probably furthest ahead of any district. They already have their team captains for the different areas. They have 2 trailers with emergency supplies. And I think they have done a pretty good job as far as that goes. But, as far as I know, they have not received any money from the town. And yet I think they're the ones that have already put in place reasonable disaster preparedness preparations. And if you see the trailers there that have all these supplies, I think one of them is going to be stored at my house and one of them somebody else's house. We're doing quite a lot in disaster preparedness, but I don't really know where this money is going because certainly, as far as I know, it's not gone to Lindenwood.
No, it's gone anywhere.
No, it's not gone anywhere. So who's paid for the
Well, I
supplies?
think it's being paid for by the residents and the Lindenwood Homeowners Association.
So I asked the city manager if we had a map of any other trailers or caches around, and that has not been identified yet.
Well, I can assure you they're there.
Okay. So there was a disaster preparedness group, and Bob Jenkins was, the spearhead of it for many years, and Doug DeVivo and Scott Barnum, and it's kind of gone sideways a little bit, some loss of interest a little bit from what Scott told me. So I don't think that the committee, the CERT program is still in force, but is there a resident committee that is actually active right now? Because it was never a town authorized committee as a Brown Act committee or an authorized ad hoc committee. It's just
That's not true.
It's just been a residents committee.
No, it wasn't authorized committee. I started the disaster preparedness committee as a town authorized committee. And I nominated Bob Jenkins as the head, met on Saturdays. We divided the town into districts, and together with the police chief at the time. And we met with the schools and presented it to the schools, and some of the schools had disaster preparedness programs, the public schools by and large did not. We then met with the Menlo Park Fire Protection District and asked if they would help us as the Woodside Fire Protection District assists Portola Valley. They didn't really have the resources to do that or to develop trailers for us to use, so we decided to do it on our own. So Bob Jenkins started to develop the program with the 17 or so districts that we had. Lindenwood became, together with parts of the area around Sacred Heart and also Lloyd Park under John Sisson became very active. And became very active with Doug DeVivo, and also we had a doctor's program, a pet program. We had a very well attended CERT program with about 70 people who were certified. And then what happened, and we also had a ham radio program, and then Peter Carpenter took it over, and I don't know what happened after that. I followed it through to that point.
And that was about 4 years ago. That was about 4 years ago. And so really it's not, so we need to kind of create some more interest in this and form it up a bit. The city manager talked about it a bit. And I know that ABAG is very involved in disaster preparedness, and they've got a recovery toolkit for elected officials that we can get the information from, and we can, kind of form it up again. And we've got the command vehicle that Doug DeVivo and the other gentleman, I forgot his name.
Paul Jamelius?
Paul Jamelius, yes. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. But, so, I think you're right. Lindenwood's all together, and we need to kind of, I know Bill Grove and Nancy Grove across the street from us, he's like the team captain for our neighborhood. But we don't have cash, we don't have stuff.
Well, if we're going to spend $20,000, I think we do need to know where we're going to spend it.
Well, I think there's a list of, Steve Noshheim was supposed to, been able to work from the fire department and getting the kits, disaster kits to the town.
Well, that's another thing. ACIL, of course, gave kits to the town. And in addition, $100,000 I asked several years ago was authorized, but that was not through the police department. And it was utilized for a new disaster preparedness center, because previously the disaster preparedness center was the old council chambers, which clearly were not going to be standing if we had a major earthquake in order to utilize it as a disaster preparedness center. So we changed that to the corporation yard, but we didn't have a suitable electrical line, so we needed to have installed a line from the existing police headquarters to the existing corporate yard. That was one element of the $100,000 cost. Then computers were put in every police vehicle so that every police vehicle became an active emergency center. And in addition, we had a second well put in the park. Those were the three major elements of that $100,000 that was authorized 6 years or so ago by the council as part of that emergency preparedness.
So I had spoken with Steve with regards to the fire district, and the fire district had indicated to me that they had some disagreements with how much funding and what they were going to be buying that the citizens would want to have. I did have a conversation, as the chief pointed out, with himself. He's been meeting with the ADAP group, and he reviewed some of the things that they were wanting to buy. There was a question of, are they in containers? Are going to be places where they can actually be accounted for and checked regularly for perishable items and things like that. So the chief was going to put together and give some consideration as to how he would manage the assets that this $20,000 would buy, and that's why it's taken some time. And I think we've agreed when we did the committee reorganization that there needed to be a staff member responsible if there's going to be any sort of expenditure by any committee, because we have to follow the processes. And as such, you know, the police department, being the emergency response arm of our government, is the one responsible for that aspect. So, so Chief, perhaps you could come up with a list working with you know, Scott and the team, and then also give us your plan as to, you know, how you would handle some of those items that you've been spending some considerable time thinking about, and then of course then make sure as we go through to exercise the expenditures that we would you know, feel comfortable that we know where the money's going to go, and then we also have a long range view of how fast how quickly or how often we'd have to replenish those items that are actually perishable.
Yes, but two things I would ask that you consider in the years to come. The first is that while the private schools in town, and remember we have 9 schools we're talking about, the private schools in town have been very well prepared with regard to the disaster preparedness. The public schools, by and large, are not very well prepared. And when you have, you know, a good part of your population in schools, what are you going to do if there is a disaster and you have this massive public school population within your boundaries, and they're not prepared? And the school administrators, I don't know in the last few years if things have changed, but that's something, you know, as much as the emergency signal, I don't know what's happened with that. They used to routinely, on a yearly basis, have the emergency signal tested. And I haven't heard anything about that in the last few years. So it's the emergency signal, have they updated their emergency preparedness plans, or do they have any? Because years ago they had none.
Well,
And the other thing is, and I don't know, you know, how much this is publicized, but Atherton's emergency supplies in large part are in a part of Menlo Park where you really have to cross over East Palo Alto. And I question how safe that's going to be.
maybe we can approve this and then do a add-on.
But once we have,
Well, I would just like to make fun of comment. This is, to some extent, in my mind, like the old joke about the man in the smoke. He says, don't tell me about your 5-year plan for draining the smoke. Throw me a rope. And, you know, we've had people with grand and glorious plans. I believe Peter Carpenter had at one time for these budget preparedness. Meanwhile, Linwood has gone ahead and done it. And I think that, you know, that's what we need. We need people to go ahead and do it. I mean, grand and glorious plans are wonderful, but really, if a disaster comes, we need the things that Linwood has done. So I would say it's possible that Linwood might be an example to the rest of Atherton.
maybe have a plan put together.
Mr. Mayor, we'll put the chief and I'll put together, along with some other input from stakeholders, of what, where, and how, and bring that back to the council.
And also touch base with the school, the public school superintendent, and include them and see what their plans are as well. All right, so can we approve the movement of the budget, because the police department is the responsible arm for disaster preparedness in our town? Second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Ron? 15 done. Okay. So then we're into 14 is going to be pulled. 11 is going to be pulled. 11, 12, 14, and 16. 16 is pulled. 17 we've already approved. 16. So we've approved them all incrementally as we've gone through. So we might as well go up to number 11. Okay? So item number 11.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have the staff report there. I just want to point out the 7 items that are the primary changes, and then the city attorney has some comments as well with respect to some recent modifications. The analysis points out that the 7 areas of change are the work furlough program for the period between Christmas Day and New Year's Day, leave caps, putting on a vacation leave accrual capped at 240 hours, sick leave capped at 960. The elimination of retiree medical, which is basically the portion above the minimum required contribution for retirees. The flexible benefit plan caps established for the Section 125 cafeteria plan at $750, $1,400, and $1,600. The retirement contribution swap over an 18-month period. There'll be a swap of the, no, it's not a swap per se, but a transfer of the liability for the employee share of the pension to the employee over that 18-month period of time. A Tier 2 retirement plans established for AB 340 new legislation for the sworn employees covered by this resolution for 3% at 50 to 2.7 at 57, and then for local miscellaneous 2% at 55 to 2% at 62. And then incorporated into this is also a merit bonus program. The program allocates 2% to a pool to be used by the city manager to allocate the staff covered by this resolution to help offset some of that PERS pension liability transfer. That concludes my portion of the staff report. The city attorney has some comments with respect to some recent modifications to the resolution.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, just real quickly, my comments were basically simply cleaning up the resolution that was circulated before. As the council is well aware, we received some comments from an outside counsel regarding some issues that she had, basically understanding mostly some of the elements in it. On top of that, there was a structural issue with the effective date. It has to be January 1st because of the way the contract works with CalPERS. Secondly, the major change is the elements